Hey Bob, I know you can hear me, so this is for you when you watch this today. All right, 1, 2, 3. Hi Bob!
We miss you.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Anybody want the microphone? All right. Bob, we love you. Timmy, we absolutely adore you.
But you do that. I'm going to read from 2 Timothy chapter 1, beginning at verse 5. This is Paul writing to Timothy, of course, and Paul writes, I have been reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. For this reason I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power, of love, and of self-discipline. So as we gather together to celebrate mothers today, and really women in general, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background. The modern holiday of Mother's Day, by the way, Mother's Day has been celebrated throughout history. There are indications that Mother's Day was celebrated like 1000 BC. So mothers have always been celebrated. The modern holiday was first celebrated in 1908. And that's when Anna Jarvis held a memorial for her mother. And she wanted to honor her mother by setting aside a day, right? And then she wanted to honor all mothers. And she said that she believed that moms were the person who has done more for you than anyone else in the world, right? So in 1914, it only took the government, almost 10 years, Woodrow Wilson signed a proclamation designing the second Sunday in May as Mother's Day. Billy Graham once said about his mom, of all the people I have ever known, she had the greatest influence on me. Isn't that true? Moms seem to hold more sway over a person than anyone else. Even after our children have grown up and moved away, who's the person that holds the most sway over them? Mom, right? Mom calls and children seem to jump. And moms are our first teachers too, aren't they? Moms start to teach us the moment we're born. Some of the things that I was looking up, some of the things that moms teach us that we hold, and you guys will follow me on this, right? They teach us about foresight, don't they? Moms say, make sure you wear clean underwear just in case you're in an accident. Amen. Right? They teach us about logic. If you fall out of that tree and break your neck, don't come crying to me. They teach us about religion, don't they? You better pray that comes out of the carpet. What about time travel? If you don't straighten up, I'm going to knock you into the middle of next week. Right? And mothers teach us about the circle of life. You guys know that one? I brought you into this world. I can take you out. So we look at the things that moms teach us, but seriously, moms really are our first teachers. And what they teach is of immense value. Have you ever heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child? You realize that is not a true statement? That is a man-made idea. Because it doesn't take a village to raise a child. All it takes is godly parents to raise a child. See, if we allow the village to teach our children, you want to know some of the things that they learn? Relativism. Basically means that your version of right or wrong is not necessarily what the person sitting next to you's version of right and wrong is. There is no absolute. Period. Your right and wrong is not right and wrong for me. Have you ever heard somebody say, well, that might be right for you? That's relativism. Scriptures tell us that there is absolutes. And that's what the danger of relativism relativism is. That there is absolutes. What about humanism? Humanism teaches that man is not special and was not made in the image of God. As a matter of fact, humanism teaches that we are God. And we know that that's not true. The village teaches heathenism. And heathenism is any worship of anything other than God. And you look around, our society today glorifies sin. If you don't believe me, watch TV. Anytime. You realize that full nudity in TV today is not uncommon? In afternoon television, primetime TV, full nudity is not uncommon. And that's when most children watch TV. We live in a society that Jeremiah was speaking of when he says, you don't know how to blush. And we, as parents, tend to want to turn our children over to the village. Not necessarily we, but society does. Paul talks about in our epistle lesson 2 important things that moms teach us. And he gives us 2 examples of godly mothers, or even grandmothers in that case, Lois and Eunice, to take into our lives and show us the way things are. Paul points out that it's mothers that teach us the important things in life. It's not the village. And what Paul says, the 2 most important things that moms teach us is to seek God and live in our faith. Paul tells us that he thanks God night and day whenever he thinks of him and is reminded of his great faith. Paul says, I am reminded regularly of your faith. And he says, I remember that because I saw it in your mother and in your grandmother. So the first thing moms teach us is how to live our faith. Now in Acts chapter 16, we know that Timothy's dad was a Greek and his mom was a Jew. And tradition has it that his dad was not a believer and that he did not support his mom's religion or his wife's religion. But look at the effect that Timothy's mom had on him. Right? Paul says, I call to remembrance that faith, that genuine faith that is in you. And the word translated as genuine is the word that means sincere or undisguised or without hypocrisy. Paul says, I saw faith without hypocrisy in you. Timothy's faith was real and Paul could see it. Everybody around him could see it. And he learned it from his mother and grandmother. So how did they teach him that faith? Did they hold him in a corner and whip him? They lived their faith out. What they did in life was shown by what they believed. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Right? We all know that verse. Do you understand what that verse really means? We don't just train our children, we lead the way. And the word train doesn't mean just teach, right? We say, okay, I'm going to give all the kids the facts and then they can make their own decision, right? Actually, the word train literally means prepare for a contest. Parents, moms especially, are to prepare your children for a contest because I guarantee you, as soon as they walk out the door, they are in a contest for life around them. Guaranteed that Satan is looking for souls to take. He knows what's in store, and he wants to influence as many people. He knows what he has, right? He knows that he's going into a lake of fire someday, and he wants to bring as many people with him as he can. You ever hear the phrase, misery loves company? Satan wants as many people around with him as miserable as he is. All right? So we are to train up a child in the way he should go. Prepare your children for the influences of the world around us. And the best way to do that, moms, dads, is for you to have a vibrant personal relationship with Jesus Christ so that everybody can see it, especially your children. Someone once said that maybe that verse should read, train up a child in the way he should go, and you should go there once in a while yourself also. Right? Because we say, well, I'm going to do what I want, but you do what I tell you. Lois and Eunice were examples of Christian living to Timothy. They lived their faith. They showed Timothy how to live a godly life. Someone once said a Christian mother's most vital task is passing the faith on, not only by what she says, but by what she is. There was a cartoon that I was looking at. It pictured a little girl asking her mom, "Mom, what is a Christian?" The next pane had the mom thinking, and she goes, "Well, dear, a Christian is a person who loves and obeys God, loves their friends, neighbors, and even their enemies. They are kind and gentle and pray a lot. They look forward to going to heaven, and they think that knowing God is better than anything on the earth. That's what a Christian is." So the next frame showed the little girl scratching her head and thinking, and then she asks, "Mommy, have I ever seen a Christian?" Parenting involves modeling Christ-like behavior and disciplines. Attitudes for our children to follow, because they need more than just a Christian description. They need an example of one. And we, as parents, have been given that task. Today, as we honor mothers, you have to understand that God gave you this task above all others. Now, I know that you'll never shield your children, even though how much you want to, moms, you'll never shield your children from all that life throws at them. But you can definitely be a light in the darkness that leads them through by being an example of God. Teaching the children about faith also includes giving them counsel in the Word. How often, especially when your children were little, did you read the Word to them? I mean, we read stories to them, so take this story and read it. Isaiah tells us in chapter 54, he says, "All children should be taught by the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children." Solomon tells us in Proverbs chapter 6, "My son, keep your father's commands and do not forsake your mother's teachings." And I could go on and on. There were, about 10 or 12 different verses that specifically talk about teaching your children the Word. Timothy's mom knew the importance of the Word. She knew the power that it contains, right? It's the power of salvation. And she taught him. 1 Timothy chapter 3, Paul writes, "But as for you, continue in what you have learned and become convinced of, because you know from whom you learned it." Who did he learn it from? His mom and his grandmother. "And how from infancy," and the word infancy there, by the way, is little baby. "So from infancy you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Jesus Christ." Timothy was taught as a child to seek God. He received religious education. He didn't go to school for it. He wasn't in seminary. He didn't do anything else. He didn't even go to the pastor or the priest. He got it from home, from his mom. Have you ever heard somebody say, "Well, I'm a Christian, but I don't want to push my beliefs on my children. I'm going to let them make their own decision"? You ever heard that? Sadly, I hear that a lot. I couldn't tell you how many times I've talked to Christian parents, And they've said, well, yes, I believe, but. So I have to always think about, what is it that you believe? Do you believe that Jesus is the only way of salvation? Because if you don't know Jesus, that means you're not going to heaven. And if you're not going to ensure that your children know him, then what are you wishing on your children? And if you don't teach them, how are they going to make a decision? From the village? It's interesting because the same parents that say, I'm not going to push my beliefs onto my children, are usually the same ones who say, I want my child to play this sport. I want them to participate in these activities. I want them to go to this college. Right? They start making all these other decisions for their child, but they don't make the most important one ever. The most important decision a person can ever make, and you're going to leave it up to chance? Godly parents begin teaching their children about the things of God from a very young age. Not only that, but moms teach us to find and use our spiritual gifts. Paul writes to Timothy and he says, for this reason, because of your faith, is what the reason is, because of this faith that is apparent in you, because it was apparent in your parents, I am persuaded, for this reason I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power, of love, and of self-discipline. Because the faith that is in you today, stir up or rekindle the gift that God has given you. You ever felt kind of low and at odds and thinking, one of my favorite sayings is, ministry is wonderful if it weren't for all the people. People have problems. We have issues in our lives, and those problems sometimes weigh on us. Right? And sometimes we get drugged down with all of this stuff. Paul says, stir up. Rekindle that fire that God has implanted in you. You ever notice how moms always push their children? Or let's say guide instead of push. I mean, when we're children, we think they're pushing us, right? Right? We're always like, get off me, I know what's going on. But moms and parents in general guide us. And they push us to develop gifts that they see in us. Right? Even the ones that we don't see in ourselves. And we find out later, all of a sudden, wow, if mom hadn't done that. You know that Thomas Edison, inventor of the light bulb, once said, when I was growing up as a boy, there was only one person who said that I would ever amount to anything. That's pretty sad, isn't it? Thomas Edison was at the bottom of his class in school. His teacher told him, you're wasting your time. You need to drop out of school and go get a job because you're not learning. So his mom took him out of school, and she taught him at home. Edison himself said, she was the best companion that a boy ever had, and I was determined that I was going to be worthy of her and show her that her confidence was not misplaced. And look at what he did. So when moms are behind you going, come on, you can do this, realize that they have your best interest at heart. They are doing what God has called them to do to help you discover your gifts so that you can stir them up and use them for God. Moms teach us about faith, and they teach us to find and use our gifts. You guys know who G. Campbell Morgan is? He is one of the most well-known, profound preachers of all time. He preached in Britain. If you ever get a chance to read some of his sermons, read them. A wonderful preacher. All 4 of his sons became pastors. And the 5 of them influenced millions for Jesus throughout the world. One day, his youngest son, Howard, had finished a sermon preaching in front of this huge crowd. And a reporter asked him, since you have 5 pastors in your family, who is the greatest preacher? And of course the reporter was expecting him to say, oh, Dad, he's the one. Any idea what young Howard said? Mom. He said, my mother is the greatest. You see, sometimes we don't realize just how influential a mother's love and concern and teaching really are. Paul shows us that moms and grandmas are some of the most influential people in the world. So as we gather together today and we honor moms and women in general, we just say thank you. Thank you for the gift that you are in our lives. There's an old Spanish proverb that says, an ounce of mother is worth a pound of clergy. Happy Mother's Day.